Hello and welcome. Today I'll be going through how I can green beans. Carrie, my beautiful wife, found these beans on sale at the Big Blue supermarket at 68 cents a pound. She dug deep and got 4 pounds. They were a little worse for the wear, but they had a good snap and tasted great raw. Getting them ready to be canned is easy. Just wash them well and snap or cut the ends so you have pieces just big enough to fit into the jars to be used. We are using brand new pint jars we picked up earlier this year. We processed the beans, washed and trimmed several days before canning them. We put the clean, trimmed beans into a container and covered them with water completely. We put them in the fridge for a day, or in this case 3 days. We feel it helps hydrate the green beans, but it also allows us to spread the process over a few days instead of doing it all at once. Of course, you need room in the fridge for 4 pounds of submerged beans, but that's not a problem for us. We learned from our first efforts that green beans shrink when canned, so we spent extra time stuffing each jar as full as possible. You might notice that my clean jars are in the gas grill. I do this to keep the jars hot. One burner set to low on my closed grill will hold the temperature right at about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. We are adding hot water and hot stock and then putting them into hot water, so keeping the jars hot to begin with will help prevent thermal shock and the possibility of shattering the glass. Many people suggest warming the new flat lids to help get the seal ready. I didn't do that this time and they work fine. New lids. It's important to use new flat lids each time because there is a chance that old lids will not reseal or not seal well enough for long-term storage. While I'm sure people are using old lids just fine, I feel they are cheap enough to prevent failure or worse, rotten food. I understand there are reusable lids available, but I don't have any experience with those. The way I make green beans extra special is to add a little seasoning to each jar. I add the hot water, then a half a teaspoon of my homemade Trinity seasoning, which is simply 1 part homemade garlic powder, 1 part homemade onion powder, and 1 part freshly ground white pepper. Then I top it off with my homemade hot turkey stock that is very low in salt. You see, I don't want to over-season the green beans with too much salt or other seasonings because I don't know how they will be used in the future. They may go on the plate as is, or I may cook them with some salty bacon, or they may be added to a casserole. So I keep it simple, but still good enough to eat right out of the jar. If you decide that you want to put salt in your beans, avoid iodized or table salt as it can affect the color, texture, and taste of your beloved beans. The rest of the process is right out of the manual. Green beans should be processed at pressure for 20 minutes. Here in Tucson, we're at 2,500 feet, so I have to use the high altitude canning method. For my pint jars, they are to be at 15 pounds of pressure for at least 20 minutes. On my old pressure canner, which she picked up for $10 in a estate sale, there's no gauge. I know it's at the target pressure when the weight is jiggling. If it stops jiggling, that means the pressure has gone too low, and I have to increase the heat and start the timer over again. Once the jars are in the pot, you can see here we are canning turkey stock too because it's the same amount of pressure and time. Simply place the lid on correctly and turn on the heat. We are using a high pressure burner to start here, but I had to move it to a lower pressure one because I couldn't keep the heat low enough once the pot was under pressure. Actually, it kept blowing the weight clean off the top. Without the weight on the vent, bring the pot to a boil. You will see steam and air coming from it. Let it do this for about 5 or 10 minutes to allow as much air as possible to escape the vessel. Then very carefully, put the weight on the vent with the proper weight at the bottom. Then wait. And wait some more. On this 10-plus-year-old canner, it takes a good 10 to 15 minutes before the seal kicks in and starts building pressure. Eventually it does. Once the weight starts jiggling, reduce the heat to medium or medium-low to manage a nice, even jiggle of the weight. This is when your time starts. As I said, if it stops jiggling, you have to start your timer over again. It should jiggle at least 1 to 4 times per minute. Mine does quite more than that, but that's fine. If it's constantly jiggling, the pressure could be too high. Once the 20 minutes are up, I turn off the heat and waited for the weight to stop jiggling. Then, using my heat-proof gloves, you can use tongs, but don't use a cloth pot holder or towel. I take the weight off and let it vent until there's absolutely no air coming from the vent. You see, in my old canner, it doesn't have a little pop-up indicator or lock, so I have to be especially careful. Remove the blistering hot jars from the pot using a canning lifter. Place on a heat-resistant surface with a hand towel on it and wait for it. That's the sound of a vacuum being created inside your jars, and it is an audible indication that your seals have sealed. Check each of the lids to make sure they have sealed. If they haven't sealed, just move the jar to the fridge and eat within 5 days. Now, leave the sealed jars on a towel overnight and check your seals in the morning. Just push down on the center of the lid, and if it moves at all, the seal did not take. And you should, I certainly would, discard the contents. They have spent too much time in the temperature's danger zone to be safely consumed. Now all you have to do is clean the jars and remove the rings. It is recommended that you remove the screw-on ring bands to allow for an easier detection of any broken vacuum seals. Store in a dark, cool place, and your beans should last 18 months or more. I don't know for sure, because we eat them before they sit that long. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please subscribe. I have many more planned in the future. Thank you for watching.